Good day. In this short video, we're going to explain Azure locks. Now, locks are something that I certainly hadn't used before, and this is what happened to me on the weekend. I was working for a client, and I shut down. I had full access to patch the machine and do some other things, and then the client actually wanted the machine powered off in Azure, so I shut it down, and it was fine. Then I went to start it up, and this is what I got. Oh, that's bad. Failure to start virtual machine, blah, blah, blah. You know, and then a bunch of other detail, and then please remove the lock and try again. What's a lock? You know, I've been using Azure since forever, and I just hadn't run into this before. So I scrambled around, and eventually I found this little lock section here. And in my case, I didn't have the ability to edit or delete this lock, which was pretty uncomfortable. I had to have somebody else do it. So we'll get into that in just a moment. So let's explain what these locks are about, how to build them, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to select delete on this just to get rid of that lock. And now if I went to overview and I went to start this thing up, it would start. I'm not going to do that because, well, we all know it's going to work. It turns out that these locks are everywhere in Azure, and I don't know how I didn't notice them, but I just didn't. So for instance, if I go off to, well, let's just go home and I'll go into my primary resource group. By the way, all of this is lab stuff, so if you feel like hacking it because you see something that's displayed that you think is confidential, yeah, it's not. This is all garbage. I wipe this out regularly and start again. So I can go to locks here and I can create a resource lock. I can also go in and create a subscription lock. So you get the idea that there's a lot of locks around. I'm not going to bore you with all of them. Okay, so you get the idea? So let's go back and create my exact situation. What happened was one of the admins, in an effort to protect the company, had gone into their resource group. Actually, let's show it to you from the machine. So we'll go into, say, this DC1 machine, and I can go to locks down in the bottom left, and I could create a lock just on this machine, but I'm going to do it at the resource group level. So anybody that's in this particular resource group, or anything that's in this resource group is going to get blocked. So let's click add, and I'm going to call this Ian test1 lock, and then there's a read-only lock and there's a delete lock. If it's a machine that you're setting the lock on, it'll stop you from deleting the machine. If it's on the resource group, it'll stop you from deleting the resource group. But, and this is critical, it does not restrict your ability, your read-only or delete rights inside that data. So let's say, for instance, you had an app lock, right? You say you were running SQL, a pretty common thing to do in Azure, and you have a read or delete lock on that. It has that will do nothing whatsoever to stop a user who has their appropriate permissions going into your SQL database and deleting data or adding data. That's not what it's about. So I'm just going to set this to read only, click OK, and then I'm going to describe this in a little more detail in this article. Here it is. Okay, so cannot delete means authorized users can still read and modify a resource. They simply cannot delete that resource. Read only means that a user can read a resource, but they can't delete it or update it. Now here is the useful part of this article. There are different control planes inside of Azure. There's an ops control plane and a data control plane. Locks apply to ops. These do not apply to the data. So here's the key, right here. The distinction means that locks prevent changes to that resource, say the machine or the application or the resource group, but they do not restrict how resources perform their own functions. For example, a read-only lock on a SQL database prevents a user from deleting or modifying that server. It does not prevent the user from creating, modifying, or updating the data inside that database. Does that make sense? I hope so. Now, let's just flip back to my machine here. You can see I created this at the resource group level, right? So now if I go back to my home group, or my home page, and I look at my PC1, that machine is part of the same resource group, and there's the lock, even though I didn't set it on here specifically. So the locks apply to anything under that parent scope, which in this case is the resource group, right? That's the parent, and below that is the virtual machine. So anything in that resource group, I now only have read-only access to. Now I can go in and edit that, or I could just delete it because I'm top of the tree. And you can set it so that people, users, admins, for instance, are not able to edit or delete this. That was my problem on the weekend. Very unpleasant. So let's go try to start this one up again. I'll click Overview, I'll click Start, and it's going to choke. Now I can go into that resource, into that lock, and because I am the global admin and I have access to everything, I can just delete this. And if I did, then I'd be able to start it up. Now you think, okay, that's not quite as complex as I thought it might be. Well, not so fast. It gets really confusing. So here are, they have this article titled Lock Resources to Prevent Unexpected Changes, which gets down to considerations before applying locks. Applying locks can lead to unexpected results. And here's a pretty substantial list of unexpected results. In my case, that one right there. A read-only lock on a resource group that contains virtual machines prevents all users from starting or restarting virtual machines. These operations require a post request. Okay, well, damn. So I find it a little odd that I, as an administrator, I can shut this server down, but I can't power it up. That's weird to me. Here's another fun one. A read-only lock on an app service resource prevents Visual Studio Explorer from displaying the files in the resource because that requires write access. Really? And here's a super fun one. If you're actually running in production in Azure. A cannot delete lock on the resource group created by Azure Backup Service causes backups to fail. What? What does delete have to do with backups? Well, it turns out that that supports a maximum of 18 restore points. When it's locked, it can't clean itself up, which means it can't delete the older ones, which means it's going to fail. Not nice. Now, if you want to get some granularity to it, this is the section you need to understand. To create or delete management locks, you must have access to the Microsoft.authorization/* or Microsoft.authorization/locks actions. But really, what this gets down to is you need to be the owner, or you need to be assigned the user access administrator to make changes to those locks. Hey, we'd really appreciate it if you give us the big thumbs up. Like really helps. Subscribe is also super appreciated. If you have any questions or comments, just put them in the comment section below. We'll get back to you, or somebody else will. And please visit us at www.urtech.ca. That's www.urtech.ca. Thanks, and have a great day. Bye-bye.